They buried our names, rewrote our legacy. But through the ashes, the blood still speaks. From Moorish courts to Louisiana sugar fields, this is the true story they tried to erase. Nobility, reclassified, royalty enslaved. Yet the fire never died. It lives in the bloodline. This is more than history. It's restoration. It's reclamation. It's truth. Bloodlines of Fire. Available now on Amazon KDP.
Peace. Foundational Black American family. Today, we're gonna be talking about the unfulfilled promise. Foundational Black Americans and reparations. Now, foundational Black Americans, the descendants of enslaved people in the United States, we endured a unique trajectory of oppression without receiving direct government reparations or group-specific redress. From slavery and Jim Crow, segregation, even all the way up to redlining and mass incarceration. FBA's sufferings has often been the catalyst for broad civil rights policies. Yet, time and time again, these policies' benefits were spread to other groups, including white Americans like white women and later immigrants, leaving foundational Black Americans as the only major ethnic group to never receive targeted compensation for centuries of racial injustice. Today, we gonna provide a historical and policy analysis from the post-Civil War Reconstruction era to the present day. We're gonna highlight, bring the light to how FBA-led struggles drove landmark reforms, while the primary gains is always frequently diverted elsewhere. We're gonna contrast this with documented cases where other groups like Native American tribes, Japanese Americans, Holocaust survivors, and various refugee populations obtained direct compensation, land, programs, or legal protection specifically for harms they endured. Finally, we're gonna discuss the ongoing resistance to Black reparations, such as the fate of H.R. 40. Foundational Black Americans won't accept nothing less than an outline proposal for a lineage-based reparations framework focused on FBA descendants. Now, Reconstruction and the broken promise of reparations from 1865 to 1900. Now, in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, formerly enslaved foundational Black Americans had hoped for reparative measures to help them transition into freedom. General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15 in January 1865, it had famously proposed allocating confiscated Confederate land in 40-acre plots to freedmen, coining the phrase 40 acres and a mule. Now, approximately 400,000 acres along the southeast coast was set aside for settlement by about 40,000 freed slaves. However, this was a short-lived promise. President Andrew Jackson, sympathetic to the former white slave owners, overturned Sherman's order in late 1865 and returned most of the land to its pre-war white owners. nullifying the hope for land grants to foundational Black American families. The federal government's only major effort to aid free slaves. Now, the Freedmen's Bureau from 1865 to 1872 was under-resourced and impeded by policies. But to their credit, they did distribute some emergency rations, built a few schools, and attempted to protect civil rights. But it didn't offer the land redistribution a long-term economic basis that emancipated blacks was promised. In fact, some slave owners received more direct compensation than freed people. For example, in Washington, D.C., the government paid slaveholders the value of freed slaves in 1862. And guess what they gave the free foundational Black Americans? Nothing. By the end of Reconstruction in 1877, the vast majority of FBAs remained landless and economically subordinated. The white dominant society often coerced this into exploitative sharecropping and tenant farming arrangements. No federal reparations were provided for the 246 years of unpaid labor and violence under slavery. The failure to provide 40 acres and a mule was the first of many betrayals. This makes foundational Black Americans the only group to never receive compensation for an institution that built the nation's wealth, chattel slavery. During the late 19th century and into the 20th, Black Americans faced Jim Crow laws, disenfranchisement, and racial terror, with thousands of lynchings without compensation for lost properties or lives. Notably, when all those Black communities was destroyed in racial massacres such as Tulsa 1921 and Rosewood 1923, survivors received little or no restitution at the time. Florida eventually provided a small reparation package to a handful of Rosewood survivors in 1994, but such instances are rare and came decades later. Basically, the post-Civil War period set the tone. Foundational Black American claims for reparative justice was acknowledged rhetorically, then systematically denied in practice. 20th century exclusions, New Deal, and GI Bill. Now, moving into the 20th century, foundational Black Americans continue to be excluded from government benefits that other groups enjoyed, making the wealth gap even wider. During the Great Depression and New Deal in the 1930s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt administration had enacted a sweeping economic relief and social insurance programs, but many were designed or implemented in ways that disproportionately excluded foundational Black Americans. For instance, the 1935 Social Security Act. This bill initially excluded agriculture and domestic workers from old age insurance and unemployment insurance. This carve-out, pressed by Southern Democrats, meant that an estimated 60% of Black workers who predominated in farm and domestic jobs were left out of Social Security's protections. Scholars even noted that key New Deal architects aimed to placate segregationist lawmakers who were determined to block any entering wedge for federal interference with the handling of the Negro question. resulting in major programs that omitted majority of black laborers. Policies like the National Labor Relations Act and other labor laws often didn't protect jobs black workers held, and New Deal relief programs allowed local discrimination in hiring and pay. Housing policies in the New Deal era also systematically advantaged whites while disadvantaging foundational black Americans. The Federal Housing Administration, created in 1934 to spur up home ownership, openly practiced redlining, refusing to insure mortgages in black neighborhoods or even white areas near black neighborhood. From its inception, FHA's aid went almost entirely to white home buyers, as its underwriting manuals deemed blacks in integrated communities too risky. Now there's a FHA policy example that occurred in Detroit. When a developer planned a mixed area housing project, FHA would not insure loans until a concrete wall was built to segregate the black neighborhood from the new white subdivision. Such practices, replicated nationwide, meant white families received federal-backed mortgages and built home equity, while black families were largely shut out of home ownership. A disparity whose effects persist in today's racial wealth gap. The so-called New Deal's housing and lending programs essentially gave race-specific advantages to whites, though they were not framed as such. By the 1940s, these policies had drawn enduring color lines on the housing maps in America. Imagine a 1942 sign in Detroit reading, "We want white tenants in our community." Such community attitudes, reinforced by federal housing policies, kept foundational black Americans out of many neighborhoods in the mid-20th century. Another monumental benefit program that excluded foundational black Americans, the GI Bill, Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, offers a stark example of foundational black Americans serving as a catalyst for policy, but being largely cut out of its benefits. The GI Bill was enacted as World War II was ending, in no small part to reward returning veterans and prevent civil unrest. Over 1.2 million foundational black Americans served in World War II. These white supremacists had the audacity to be concerned among Southern segregationists that returning black veterans having sacrificed for the nation would leverage public sympathy to demand an end to Jim Crow. To preempt this, Southern Democrats shaped the GI Bill's administration to favor white veterans and gave local, often racist officials control. As a result, on paper, the GI Bill was race neutral. It offered college tuition, low-cost home loans, and unemployment support to all veterans. But in practice, black veterans was largely denied these benefits. Historian Ira Kitts Nelson famously documented that in many northern cities, fewer than 100 to 67,000 VA-insured mortgage loans went to non-whites. And in some deep south areas, black veterans got almost none. In Mississippi, only 2 of 3,229 VA home loans in 1947 went to black borrowers. The GI benefits were administered by local VA offices, banks, and colleges that routinely excluded or segregated foundational Black Americans. Black veterans were blocked from buying homes in suburban developments like Livingston Town due to racist covenants and lender practices. Foundational Black Americans was often steered away from universities. Many colleges refused to admit Black students despite GI Bill funding. Even the VA itself pushed Black veterans into vocational programs instead of universities, and even denied some educational claims arbitrarily. Critically, while millions of white World War II veterans used the GI Bill to climb into the middle class, obtaining college degrees, skilled jobs, home ownership, and capital, most Black veterans couldn't access that same ladder. The sweeping bill helped white Americans prosper and accumulate wealth post-war years, but it didn't deliver on that promise for veterans of foundational Black American descent, instead widening wealth and education gaps amongst Black Americans. Even researchers estimated that the desperate implementation of the GI Bill, it contributed significantly to the post-war racial wealth divide. This shows the wickedness of white supremacy, how they intentionally designed to deny Black gains. Do you know there was actually a white congressman that stonewalled the GI Bill unemployment payments for veterans unless Blacks were effectively excluded? He wouldn't give not even the white veterans a check unless the foundational Black American veterans was excluded from the bill. Even some Southern postmasters would refuse to deliver the forms Black veterans needed to claim jobless benefits through the GI Bill. In short, FBA veterans fought for democracy abroad and returned home to find the benefits of their service disproportionately funneled to white Americans. No reparative measures were ever taken to compensate Black veterans for this discrimination. There was no adjustment to the GI Bill to account for Jim Crow, nor subsequent federal programs to close the resulting gap, the wealth gap. Thus, mid-20th century federal policies like the New Deal, the GI Bill, illustrated a recurring pattern: Black American struggles.
You gotta pick, me or her.
My people been on this land for over 400 years. We built this country.